Yeah.
Got it. We're recording.
All right.
John Howe.
It is 10 o'clock. Welcome to everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us today at our FMDiSC meeting on this sad 19th anniversary of September 11th. So I'm really happy to have Dave Knight here. He's going to be presenting on the his resurrection of a solution that was crashing repeatedly. He'll give you all the details. You want to share your screen, Dave, and take it away?
Greetings, everyone. Hopefully this goes off well. Yeah, I'm calling this Operation Resurrection. Basically the ability to bring a dead or dying database back to life. So coincidentally, my favorite movie is Young Frankenstein, so hope you'll have some fun with that. Let me just get I'm gonna get my toolbars in a way that I'm not being frustrated. Okay, anyway, I'm Dave Knight. Many of you, or all of you know, I'm with Angel City Data. A little bit about us. We're a Claris Platinum partner of the Claris Solutions Alliance, whatever that is now. We're certified on everything you can be certified. We've won a number of FileMaker Excellence Awards over the years, outstanding tech support to the FileMaker community. We won Design of the Year a number of years ago. And then we were also Partner of the Year for the Americas. A couple of years ago, we were also, City of Burbank chose us as the Small Business of the Year for the city. And most of you guys know me as a co-founder and one of the board members. So let me tell you, just kind of set the expectations correctly. You know, what are we going to be talking about in this session? Well, we're going to be talking about, again, a resurrection thing, but I want to kind of just set the background, the tone, the environment, what was the climate like during this? And it happened almost exactly a year ago. So I'm kind of rolling back the Wayback Machine, but it was a client emergency. We had this file crashing, but just the climate was big client emergency, huge stress on their team, on our team, et cetera. So this is just one of those things where we have to figure something out because it was really a mess. And we'll go into that in a bit. This session is going to be deep and geeky in some certain areas. You're going to see how my mind and how some of the team members at Angel City, how we attacked this thing, how we went down some rabbit holes, what we learned and so forth. But it gets pretty deep and we pulled at a lot of little threads. We did a lot of testing, given the criteria that had to happen. Most everything you're going to see here has been tested multiple times. We tested this, we tested it on Mac, we tested it on Windows, tried different versions of FileMaker, test for timing, performance gains, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of testing behind everything. And again, all the different steps, if we have something, if we say something here, it means we tested it generally. It was also very complex. Getting this sort of resurrection done required a lot of tight coordination and sort of thinking in four dimensions of time. We can do this at the same time we're doing this, and what if we are doing this and this has to come first, and just a lot of sort of a bucket brigade of how things had to come together. And I'll probably get through most of the rest of this session and then maybe do a little Q&A. And then I want to hit the intermission button for a bit, take 10 minute break for the group, and then I'm going to come back and kind of apply or pull out a lot of the tips that we learned, a lot of the details behind the scenes stuff that I talk about in the case study. But what are some of the real takeaways technically that we learned about? So the case is a large and busy client. They had about 170 users at about 8 locations scattered around the US. Headquarters in Los Angeles, but 7 other locations scattered as far as Chicago, Atlanta, Santa Fe, things of that nature. Their operations, their hours of operation, because they're scattered around the US, it really maps out to about 5 a.m. To about 9 p.m. PST. So not a lot of time for tinkering, in a real, with 170 users on a system, you don't have a lot of time to sit there and go, let's try this, let's try this. You have to kind of choose your options well when things are going to be quiet. And we're not going to want to start working on a database at 10 o'clock at night. Not that we didn't do some of that, but we really don't want to have that be the main point. So the challenge of the hours of operation, let's just say, were a little bit tight. The local headquarters, about 100 people, about 75 people on FileMaker Pro, about 25 people using Go, roughly. Around the rest of the country, accessing the system either via WAN or remote desktop was about 70 people, a mix of Pro and Go. So again, a lot, we've got remote desktop people, wide area access people, Go clients, Pro clients, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of people hitting this thing. Everybody's using generally almost 100% Macs. There's a few Windows boxes, but mostly Macs, and most of them reasonably good shape. These are not 7 or 8 year old Macs, but relatively, last 2 or 3 years. And the only sort of prescribed downtime window we had was pretty much each week at Saturday. Around Saturday afternoon, they could kind of shut down the server, give you about a 24-hour window, and go, okay, we got to get back up by around Sunday midday or so. And so that was sort of an area that we did have to kind of get some work done. Let's talk about the database. The database itself, pretty big and pretty active. It was built, by the way, this database we inherited, was built by another shop. So we're kind of being brought in to kind of help out on this. The database is a single file system with about 75 tables in it. So, I think a lot of us have systems that are perhaps this size in terms of schema. But there's about 5 tables in the system with between 1 and 9 million records each. So that's some pretty high volume in terms of, again, single file and about 5 tables with over 1 million records. So that's a lot of data being packed into this. And again, high traffic. 4 of the tables in the system were adding about 5,000 records a day. So a pretty high record accumulation rate as well. So again, when you get a sense of that, roughly 500 records an hour are being added, created and indexed and validated and all that sort of stuff. So you're hitting the server pretty hard when you're doing a lot of record adds. Deletes are as well, but adds are particularly burdensome as well. The file size, about 45 gigabytes. So again, not for the faint of heart. It's a pretty good little chunky file there. We had about 30 gigabytes of remote container images, PDF files, things of that nature too. So again, it's pretty good. You got, you're looking at 75 gigs of overall FileMaker stuff. So again, if you think about doing backups, you think about moving things, you saving a compacted copy, et cetera, there's a lot of burden in working with this much data in a FileMaker system. The kinds of work, general business, CRM, orders, inventory control, things of that nature. And again, over the years, this system's been used for a number of years. So over the years, the other development shop had, let's add a new module here. Let's add some new reports. Let's continue to do what we as FileMaker developers do. We sort of just patch new mods, new tweaks, new reports, new capabilities over time. So it really hadn't been pulled down, put on the rack, and sort of redesigned, or even significantly kind of remodeled halfway through or whatever. It was constantly being worked on with little things here and there. So it's got that, there's a little bit of Winchester Mystery House, not a lot, but a little bit of things that we tried that didn't work and we never really ripped it out. So a little bit of debris in there. One of the other things, there were a lot of scripts. We have this big giant burly script that does all these processes. A lot of these scripts were sort of just thrown up and go, let's run this on the server, it'll be better. Not a lot of attention given to that, but a lot of scripts that got thrown up onto the server because it was slowing down the users or something. So this is just a little bit of the background of the file. The server hardware, we had worked with them a while back and got them some pretty, this is a couple of years ago, but we got them an enterprise class hardware. I would say they've got a really, really strong server. It's got 2 CPUs, Xeons, 3.4 gigahertz, that nice high clock speed that FileMaker likes, 8 cores each. So we got about a total of 16 cores. We've got about 120 gigabytes of RAM, which is solid. And we've got 4 SSD RAID 10s that are connected to 3 RAID cards. So if you want to think about that, that's literally a RAID 10 for the system, a RAID 10 for the database hosting disk, a RAID 10 for the backups, and another RAID 10 for the progressives. So we had, and again, these are, and the hosting file or the hosting drives had their own RAID card. The system had its own RAID card. So we actually shared a RAID card for the 2 backups. But by and large, everybody had really good paths for their drive systems. We had 4 1 gigabyte NICs. 2 of them were bonded for the LAN. 2 of them were bonded for the external, for remote desktop and for the remote users to be able to access. So that's pretty strong. They were running FileMaker Server 16. And I would say 85% 16 clients and a handful of 17 clients. They were getting ready, thinking about moving to 17 in the near future. So we had started getting a few of the users using FileMaker 17 just to make sure that the legacy system was going to be compatible. So what's the history of this system? Well, it's a little checkered. It's not, this is not like, I think a lot of us, we walk into an organization, they've got a legacy FileMaker system, and you're going to go, has the file ever crashed? Well, yeah, this particular file has crashed many times. We don't know exactly how many times, but lots of times over many years.
Sorry.
And that's not a good place to be. So, and we also, talking with the IT people, a previous developer, et cetera, there were times we would get a crash. In years before Angel City came in, there would be a crash. The other developer would get a clone, recover the data, import, reserialize, set it back into place. But there were other times where they did not have the time to do that. So a lot of the time, we would just go to the last backup and lose hours of data, or nope, the last 2 backups had problems with them as well. We're going to just either throw the crashed files back into service or recover them and put them back into service. So again, these are not the healthiest of files. The client, when we knew them, were having roughly about a crash every couple of weeks. And when I say a crash every couple of weeks, I'm talking about things are getting slow, processes are all of a sudden slowing down. The IT guys would then drop the server. So it wasn't necessarily a hard crash for frozen up. Sometimes it was things were starting to get really slow, things were bottling up. And so they would stop, they would consider that a crash. So it may not have been a cord pull, we crushed the file kind of crash, but they also had those kind as well. So they had soft crashes and hard crashes, and it was at the cadence of about every couple of weeks. And the IT guys largely were kind of dealing with this themselves. They would go to the last backup or whatever. We weren't a part of any of the maintenance of any of this sort of stuff. Again, the IT department, both through poor training, but also through just necessity, would have to get things back up. And there are often times where they literally had to, try to boot users off or shut down the database server, and they couldn't, and they would have to restart the box and do some nasty things. So this was not an ideal situation. The client had sent their files to Claris before we even entered the picture and confirmed, yeah, these files have got damage, and Claris saying there's nothing we can do. So their options, and again, this was years earlier, so their options were, yeah, we're getting a new system, Angel City's building us a new system, but we know that our existing system is in kind of crushed up shape. So we're looking at all this going, this is not a great place to be. This is a file that's absolutely been crunched a lot, with a lot of weight on it, a lot of traffic on it, high volume environment, and so on and so forth. So this is do we throw our hands up and say we can't help you? So then the real storm happened. They've been using this thing. The company's been busy, they've been growing, and they're suddenly having daily crashes. So all of a sudden, the IT guys are literally having to reboot, not just shut down FileMaker server, because if they would stop the database server and then restart it, it would work well for a little bit, but almost immediately start freezing up again. So it almost always required a full server restart. They would stop the database server and then restart the box. And this big giant box takes, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes just to restart the OS. I mean, really just to boot up from a cold stop, it takes a long time. So they were also rehosting corrupt database backups at times. Oh my gosh, again, I don't have time to do a recovery. We may have something that crashed yesterday. Our backups are not pure and fresh and clean and so forth. So that's not good. So again, we're talking about multiple system and server restarts each day to an organization that's got 170 users on this. They're experiencing huge amounts of downtime. They're missing data because they're going to backups that might be an hour ago or 2 hours ago. So they're losing data. And they started getting some business losses. Some of their customers were irate because an order would show up without the wrong information on it or whatever. It was getting pretty catastrophic for them. We figured out that almost every server reboot with this many bodies and average salaries and so forth was about $3,000, and they're doing 1 or sometimes 2 a day. So that starts adding up. And of course, we're in the middle of building a system for them to replace it, but this is an enormous system and it's 5 months away. We have this partially built. Imagine, if you will, somebody's living in a house with a really rickety roof and leaks and the walls are kind of rickety, and you go, yeah, we're building the new house over here. The studs are up, but we don't have a roof on it. We don't have a lot of the stuff that's ready to go. And so all of a sudden the client's like, we got to jump into this thing. And we're like, we're not ready. We're nowhere near ready. And jumping into this half-built system, which has not been tested and still is missing a lot of functionality, is going to be a disaster as well. So as you can see, really a bad place to be. What's the prayer? Squeeze 5 more months out of this rickety old system. Can we do it? We don't know, but we said, you know what? We got to try. So the plan in the simplest of measures. Let's review the server. Let's start looking at the server. And what we're doing here is trying to go, what can we fix that's going to be quick and high impact initially? And then we'll get our hands a little dirtier as we go along. So touching up the server might be something that reveals some hardware configuration, software stuff that we can really touch up and then maybe see some impact. Let's also research the health of the file. Let's see if we can reduce the system load. Because in any system, I don't care if it's FileMaker or otherwise, if your system is working really hard, there's a higher propensity for corruption, damage, load, intolerance, et cetera, et cetera. So if we can pull, if you're pulling a trailer with 10 tons on it, if you can pull 2 tons off, it gets lighter. Everything gets easier. Hardware, server, FileMaker, scripts, all these things get lessened. So we want to see if we can reduce that system load. And then we want to kind of look, again, if you know anything about me, when I talk about troubleshooting, I look at the environment, that's the server, network, et cetera. I look at the solution, let's take a look at the schema, the file, et cetera. And then I always want to look at the data. What is the data doing inside? Is it problematic? Are there issues there, and so forth? So we're going to look at all these things. So looking at that server, the logs showed us a lot of stuff. We were seeing that a lot of looking at top call, looking at stats logs and event logs and so on and so forth, a lot of the scripts are taking a long time. We've got some standard scripts that are taking a long time. We've got some PSOS scripts that have issues and problems and are taking a long time. And then they've got some maintenance server-side scripts that are running every X number of minutes or hours or so forth. And those are revealing some timeouts or some really slow issues. Those PSOS scripts, the original solution, again, the previous development shop kind of just threw some of these scripts up into PSOS land, and they didn't really debug them. So we were counting in the logs about 15,000 script errors a day showing up in the PSOS stuff. So that's a huge amount. So these aren't necessarily, delete all records or crazy things like that, but we got 15,000 errors. There's a lot of things going on there, and we wanted to take a look at that. We also found at multiple times around when these crashes would happen or when these slowdowns would happen, the server would drop some dump files, which were showing that the FileMaker SASE or script engine was failing. It was getting crushed, and it tended to happen when some of the server-side scripts were running. We also noticed that the server-side scripts were competing with the FileMaker backup schedules. So we had these really aggressive server-side scripts that are just grabbing a bunch of data and crunching and polishing and setting numbers and so forth. And all of a sudden the backup comes along. And again, if you've got this server-side script that's just chewing through data, 170 users, and you're trying to get a backup to run in the middle of all that, the backups a lot of the times would just fail. They could not execute because they were stacked up on top of where these server-side scripts were. So that was another thing that we looked at. The RAM cache on the server was set to 40 gigabytes. That's an enormous RAM cache for a system like this. Also, you have the ability in this server admin console to set the maximum script sessions. So these are the server-side PSOS level scripts. It was set at 150. That's a lot. That's saying I can throw 150 things, almost like 150 extra clients at my server that are working in the background. So that's a high number too. So we were kind of raising our eyebrows there a little bit. Looking at the server, we also saw, hey, there's some of the disks are set to be indexed. That's unneeded. We found some unneeded software, some little debris. We had, I think they had 3 or 4 remote access tools like Log Me In and 3 or 4 of those types of things that weren't all needed. So we were able to go in there and go, okay, these are 5 or 10 things that we can do. Nothing huge, but some miscellaneous things that are all minutia, but let's give attention to those. And one of the other things that we saw was FileMaker server wasn't responding for them at all times. So we would go in and do things like, disconnect all users, and we wouldn't get any sort of feedback, or they would even do some things with the command line that would not seem to execute. So we're like, okay, this doesn't sound right. FileMaker server sounds like it's a little hinky as well. So as you can see on this page, there's a lot of things that are like, and again, when you're doing this kind of work, it's not the one thing that you find, it's the 10 little things that all add up that help tell a story or help give you indications of where you might look. So some of the things, again, on the server, some of these things relatively quick and easy to address. We went in and set the cache to about 2 gigabytes. Matter of fact, I was talking with Wim DeCord about this. He's like, set the cache to 2 gigabytes and then we can play around with it. We set it to 2 gigabytes, it immediately crashed. We're like, okay, sorry, Wim, we're not gonna do that again. We put it back, we split the difference. We went to about 20 gigabytes. We got that down lower later. Again, with the RAM cache, we had a lot of RAM available and we had super fast disk systems. So being able to exchange data between the RAM and the disk, we didn't feel like there's huge bottlenecks there, and the logs kind of showed that we were correct. But for whatever reason, the system had troubles with a smaller amount of RAM cache. We also took those maximum script sessions and we lowered those from 150. And what can happen when you have 150 max script sessions is, again, if you can have a user maybe that says, I want to push this button and go process this order, and if it's set asynchronously, that starts to work immediately on a brand new session. That user can then go to the next order, do the same thing, go to the next. So one user might be spinning up, hey, it's the end of the day, I want to process my 20 orders. One user could possibly be spooling up 20 sessions that are doing some pretty high impact tasks. So we were getting these pools of PSOS scripts that were just kind of accumulating, and next thing you know, FileMaker server would just cry uncle and stop because it couldn't get anything done. And by the way, one of the things that I want to point out, we looked at the hardware and we looked at a lot of the hardware on this particular box, how much total RAM, how much of the CPU, how much of the disk, or whatever. We never ever saw any of the hardware getting completely maxed out. So you have to kind of consider when you're thinking about a FileMaker server, you're hitting a file, and the physical file on the hard drive has some limitations. You're talking through FileMaker server software, and the FileMaker server software has certain limitations, right? And then you're actually, those things are hitting the disk drives, the CPU, the RAM, and you have hardware limitations as well. We were pretty confident that the hardware limitations were not getting maxed out. This was either the file was not able to take on additional burden, or FileMaker server runs out of rope at a certain point in time. You can't run 1,200 customers in a high volume environment on FileMaker server, even if you had, aircraft quality server components and so forth. The FileMaker server software is not that efficient of an engine to handle things like running eBay or whatever. That's where big iron SQL databases step in. So anyway, Point being, we were possibly putting too much burden with these PSOS sessions and putting too much burden on the server. So we also went in some of those miscellaneous things. We killed the unneeded software, turned off the disk indexing, uninstalled unneeded software, etc. We looked at the backup schedules. We looked at the server-side script schedules. We adjusted those a little bit so that they weren't standing next to each other as much. We had little windows of time where we could get the server-side script schedules, had plenty of time to run, and the backups weren't getting challenged to execute at the same point in time. And we trained the IT staff on the proper server admin and using the command line. We introduced them to the command line and said, look, don't just stop the database server, go in there, kick off the users, close the files if you can, and stop the database server, and then do the rest of your stuff. So we kind of walked them through the safety chain of executing, bringing the server down safely so you're not continuing to do bad things to the existing file to keep things from at least getting worse. We also made a plan because of the unresponsiveness. We said, you know what, next time we bring things down, let's absolutely reinstall FileMaker 16. Let's tackle that. So those are the things that we did for the server, and I think they got a little bit of relief from that. The other thing I'm going to tell you is we were working in a very taxing environment for this, as you can imagine. So we weren't sitting there we weren't on site as local IT guys going, let's change the RAM cache and then wait for 3 days and see if things get better. No, we came in and did, let's apply this, are things better or not? Things got a little bit better. They were still proactively restarting the box, I think, every morning. Or whatever, but things got a little bit better, but it was still, they were still struggling and getting freeze ups and so forth. So we wanted to look at the file next, the physical FileMaker file. So we grabbed the earliest feasible backup because what they had on the live server had actually more crashes, but we were able to get a backup that had almost all of the programming in place, but certainly experienced fewer crashes, so less damage to the file. Wanted to, for those that don't know, the company FMDiSC has a tool that allows you to kind of look at the file structure of a FileMaker file and compare it against earlier versions. But the company FMDiSC used to be run by the late Winfried Hueslick, and he passed away, sadly, a number of years ago. But Winfried was a mad scientist, and on a number of occasions I had seen or heard FileMaker developers going to him with corrupt or broken files that FileMaker Incorporated had said, we can't help you. And Winfried could go in there and do some crazy little magic and move a few bits around and get things working again. So we reached out to that company, got nobody responding to us at all. There's nobody, I think they'll still sell you a product via some sort of online shopping cart, but nobody was responding at all about, can we do any file repair? So that was an avenue that we didn't have. We did find in our testing, we found that grabbing the copy that we had, we did have more reliability when we had recovered it. So there's a pro and con. When you do a recovery of a file, its main intention is to go in there and be able to strip the data out, get the data in a clear, usable fashion so you can pull it out and put it into a fresh shell. But I think we've all seen options too, where a recovery actually lets a file open that wouldn't, or maybe makes it a bit more reliable. We did find greater reliability. The copy that we had running it, we definitely had some issues with it. Recovering it made it a little bit better. And we tested the recovery on all versions, on all platforms. So we did recoveries, Mac and Windows, 16, 17, 18. The best combo that we found, it didn't matter whether it was Mac or Windows, but 17 seemed to give us, for this particular file, seemed to give us the best results. So now we've got this earlier backup. It's got fewer crashes. We have looked at it a little bit. We've recovered it. We're calling this V2. So we're going to go, this is a slightly healthier version of the file than what's in production, V1 on the client servers. But one of the other things that we found, this is really interesting. We found very disturbing font and formatting history inside the recovery logs. So literally hundreds of fonts that looked like these that were being recovered, and we're like, oh my gosh, number one, this doesn't look good. I don't like the fact that we've got whatever Ukrainian, Russian, or North Korean fonts in our system. And number two, we're building the new version of the system, and we're going to be inheriting all of their data. And I certainly don't want to bring all this polluted data into the new system in 5 months from now either. So Are these fonts, is there a possibility that a corrupt font or just a bad font is causing a problem as well? I don't know. The recoveries didn't show, you know, here's a corrupt layout or here's a bad font. We didn't get any sort of indications, but just looking through the logs of the recovery, I just saw, like I said, hundreds of fonts in this system. And I'm going, this makes me nervous. I want to try to see if we can get at that. So we looked at the file, and now we want to talk about reducing that system load. So how can we take off some of the burden of the system? We grab that V2 copy that's been recovered. We've got sample data in it. We put it up on our servers. Now we start looking at all those scripts. So we have regular scripts that are being run that are maxing out on top call, et cetera. We have server-side scripts that similar. And then we also, so we grab some of these scripts, and we're not doing 50 scripts. We grabbed 10 or 20 scripts that were the biggest offenders and going, hey, these are the ones that seem to be clogging things up. These are the ones that people are running frequently that tend to have problems when we're having crashes or slowdowns or things of that nature. So let's just focus on those. We were able to get the script speeds anywhere from 2 times faster to 10 times faster, which is great. We grabbed those PSOS scripts and we optimized them for speed. We took an attempt at getting in there and debugging, getting that 15,000 amount of daily errors on PSOS scripts, getting that down way, way, way lower than that. So I don't think we got it all the way down to 0, but we did significantly reduce the amount of debugging and errors that were happening on those PSOS scripts. Again, some of the PSOS scripts, you know, those scripts where you want to sit there and click a button and process an order, rather than making those asynchronous so I can let somebody have 10 of them running concurrently, we said, nope, we're going to make the end user wait. It may take 30 seconds, half a minute, you know, to run this, but we're not going to let you spin up 10 of these things and do that multiplying effect. So we have to make the users wait for just a little bit, but far better to have each user wait for 30 seconds here and there than to drop the server, crush everything, and now everybody's down for a bit. So so we had to distribute that load around until we got things a little better. And then again, one of the things we found out, oh yeah, the users copy stuff off the internet and just paste it in a field, and it's coming from a North Korean website or whatever. That's how these fonts were getting in there. So how do we prevent that? We replaced all of the paste commands. We hijacked the menu commands and turned that into paste as text, which of course pastes the text in but strips it of any sort of formatting or any font embeddedness. So that was something that we did to kind of prophylactically keep things from getting worse moving forward.
Dave?
Yeah.
We've also had experience where pasting from the internet has introduced invisible characters that crashed entire systems.
Yep.
So yeah, and it's just general best practice not to allow that.
Yep. Completely correct. So we've done tune-ups on the scripts, PSOS, regular scripts, SSS scripts. We turned off the asynchronous ability to run one person running multiple versions of the same script. We've got the paste as text. So we've done some programming changes to the file that are going to make this thing better. We put it up on our, again, it's on our servers. We start benchmarking this against a V1 versus V3 and how are we doing on the various timings. We get the users, we get a handful of a group of pilot program people at the company to log in and go, hey, test these 10 or 20 scripts that we've tweaked up, make sure everything looks like it's working the way it should, so on and so forth. So we did a lot of testing before we moved forward with anything. So now we have this V3 version. V2 is recovered. V3 is with some programming changes here and so forth. And so we're feeling pretty good about that. We also, because we're going to need to move V1 into V3, we wanted to test and see what kind of data migration timeline we're looking at. So we ran that test a few times, came in at around 2 hours. Again, 45 gigs of data. It's a lot of data movement. So the V3 file is ready. It's a little cracked, it's got some problems in it. One of the other things we did on the live file gently over the course of weeks, one of the things that you also have to understand about us, we're trying to be very hands-off with the live system. We're trying not to do any heavy processes on the live system because it's crashed more than the V3 version of the file we have. And also there's more users in there and there's less time for us to get in there and monkey with stuff. But we were able to go in there and go, look, let's archive some data and pull it out. Let's get rid of some containers. So we reduced the amount of data, which again, helps reduce the load on backups, helps reduce the load on everything. So we did a little bit of that on the V1 file. We've got our V3 file that we've sort of bandaged up with recovery and doing some light PSOS and regular script tweaking. It's got fewer crashes on it. It's been recovered. We've got some script attention where we've gotten more performance and less errors. And we've also added that paste as text. So again, a slightly better version of the file, crossing our fingers that this is going to be in good shape. So this is the first of 2 migrations that we're going to do. We call this mini migration day. This is mini migration, not the big one. So what we did, go on site, go to the live production server, save a backup, stop the server. Next step, we're going to move that backup to an external hard drive. You're going to learn about why we did all this stuff after the intermission, why we did all these different steps and why we did things a certain way. There's a method to all of our madness here. So grab the copy it to an external hard drive. On the server, once that copy is even happening, we're already starting to move the backups. We're going to reinstall FileMaker 16. So concurrently, we're moving the backups to have them safely, getting ready to do a reinstall of FileMaker 16. Concurrently, now next step is I'm copying from this external hard drive to a laptop to do the work. And at the same time, the server team is working on the server and reinstalling FileMaker Server 16. On the laptop, we're running the V1 to V3 data migrator. And meanwhile, again, the server team at this point, this is about a 2-hour process. The server team double checking the FileMaker server installed correctly, testing it, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a fresh install of FileMaker 16 now. We have the live data migrated into our latest sort of a repaired file, which is good. Next step after that, we got to move the V3 file with the master data back onto the hard drive externally. We're going to copy that to a test server, just in case. So this is, again, this is happening on a Saturday afternoon or whatever. We've got 5 or 10 key users that are standing by. We put this on a test server so they can sort of bang on it, make sure everything looks good and is working good. As they're testing it, we're also at the same time copying that same version of the file to the production server. If it's in good shape and the users don't find anything, we want to just throw the switch and be live. We don't want to have to go, oh, now that they're finished, we'll move it over. No, we did this concurrently, assuming that everything was going to be fine. The test came back fine. Again, we had tested on our servers with their users before this as well. But again, we're using belt and suspenders along this way. And then, of course, finally, the user tests are complete. They give us a thumbs up on that. And we basically just turn on the production server with the new sets of files hosted there. So we got through that, which is great. We did get some improvement. We got the speed boost. All of a sudden, we're not working the server quite as hard because tasks are finishing faster. We're getting fewer crashes. FileMaker server is now responsive. So we're in a little bit better shape. We're not seeing crashes every day now. They're still getting some proactive, some accumulation of slowdowns and so forth. So the IT guys just kind of got into this framework of, look, we can't go perhaps a week at a time without a problem. So let's just come in and it's either every day or every other day, we're going to restart everything, freshen everything up, just to be, again, a little bit proactive on that. So we're in better shape right now. We can start breathing a little bit better, but we're not done. That next part, we want to look at the data. So remember how we talked about all that crazy, all those fonts that are sort of inside the file. We're like, okay, we got to get all that bad data stripped. We got to clean it up and pull it out of the system. So we're going to try to export it. We could run all sorts of scripts that do font reformatting or stripping the formatting of the fonts. That's a huge amount of burden on a server and a file that's already got problems. So we don't want to do that on a live system and so forth. So and we also don't want to hit the modification timestamps on all the data and so forth. So we're going to export it out. And when we're looking to export it, we plan to strip the fonts, the styles, and the formatting. We want a clean sheet of paper with that data coming back in. And again, secondarily, we want those bad fonts to not even exist, because if we pull them into our new system, they're going to be in there as well. We don't want that. So we want to keep that from getting into the new system that's down the road. The challenge that we found is we need to preserve, there's a number of tables where, first and foremost, we have some international stuff in there, diareses, umlauts, quotes, tildes. So when you're looking at these types of characters, if you do certain types of exports from FileMaker and you're not paying attention, these can get strung together with illegal characters, or the little black boxes, ASCII characters, or UTF characters that are funky. So we had to play around to get the right format out so that we retained these, but without any formatting. We also we have 19 tables in the system where there's one field in each of those 19 tables, and we absolutely needed to retain the formatting. So we have either a color that they were using that internally meant something, or something was bold or not, but it had business meaning. And this is their old system. Our new system is going to apply those formats as needed with custom formatting or conditional formatting and things of that nature. They did it in their old system with changing the data. So we needed to retain that because it had business meaning. So we got 19 tables where there's a field in each of those 19 tables. We got to retain all that formatting. So we're just kind of making a mental note of this. So we grabbed that same, the cleaned up version of the system that we put on their servers. It's now on ACD's servers. We're fiddling around with it. And we figured, you know what? Best way to recreate that formatting would be to create a CSS calc field and capture that formatting as text in a new calc field. So we've got a new calc field that we've bet that's doing a get as CSS stuff, and it's pointing at these 19 fields across these various tables. One field, 19 tables. So we're adding 19 calc fields to the entire system to kind of grab this. So we need to have exports of the data to do that stripping and formatting. So we needed, in this V3 copy of the file, we created 68 exports to merge files without any formatting on it. And of course, all of this has to be tested, et cetera, et cetera. We also, now that we've pushed all this, if we push all this data out to the 68 data files, merge files, we need a method to reapply that formatting once it's brought back in. We thought about doing that in the V3 file, but again, this is a big processor-heavy task, and we're trying to keep that kind of programming out of their live file because, again, it's funky. If you push too hard on this system, things can get broken. So we decided to use a brand new FileMaker file, which we dubbed Scrubber, and we're going to use this file to reapply the formatting. So this little Scrubber file is going to pull in 68 data tables into it. Going to check the record count against what's expected. We're going to integrate it with the V3 file. And it's going to go, hey, the record counts look good, the serial numbers look good. We're doing a lot of testing. But we're also going to use this and go, hey, that CSS calc field that we brought in, let's go ahead and use that and now apply this formatting to this one field in the 19 tables where it's needed. So we also had to go into the V3 file because ultimately we're going to need to script all of this. So those 68 data files are now sitting in the Scrubber. They're getting the CSS, they're getting the formatting applied. And then we need the V3 file to reach into that Scrubber file and re-pull in all the data and to re-serialize it. So we've got some scripting that's going into this V3 file. We've got export scripts that we've added. We've got some import scripts. Now we have to start tracking the timings for all of this because, again, we've got a 24-hour window, and we want to make sure that if we drop the server and start this whole process, we can land it within the parameters of the time that we have. By the way, this is a copy, just an image of sort of the scrubber file. So again, we've got your 68 tables over here. Some of them have CSS fields in them. I can push a button and just process this and see what kind of total running time it took to apply the processing. Some of these things took hours to do, some seconds. And then again, we were tracking record counts and checking the total timestamps and total running time and which files, where the path I'm using to where I pulled the files. And so again, highly scripted, super geeky, but we built this little scrubber file to kind of do all that. So we've tracked all the timings. We've got a V4 file that's got export and import scripts. We got a scrubber file that's used as an intermediary thing. We're feeling, you know, pretty good right here. So the game plan. We want to migrate. We want to drop the live server, get their V3 data. We want to do a data migration into our V4 file because our V4 file has all those merge file exports in it, and it also has the import scripts from the scrubber file. And we found a few other little things along the way. By the way, while we're doing all of this, we're having the users test FileMaker 17 server on an alternate server they have. So we're also thinking about, hey, if we're going to do all this, it's time to move them to FileMaker 17 because the new system that we're also building for them requires 17. So we're sitting and we're thinking ahead going, they're using 16, we reinstalled it, it's good, it's weeks later, we know we want to get them onto 17 eventually, let's test and make sure their old system works on 17 so that we could do that. So the plan, we get the data from V3 to V4. Once the data is in V4, let's export those 68 tables as files. The scrubber, let's pull those 68 files in. Let's apply the CSS formatting, check our record counts, all that sort of stuff. And then V4, reach into the scrubber and import that cleaned, reformatted data. And then of course, save a compacted file at the end of all this. We're doing a lot of movement of data, so it's going to be smart to kind of save compacted. And then again, install and deploy on a new instance of FileMaker Server 17. So we got 24 hours to do this. Let's hit the button. Let's watch what happens. It took 80 hours. So that wasn't going to help us. We're like, oh my God, this sucks. We can't get this thing done in the window of time that we have. We only have that 24-hour downtime window, Saturday noon to about Sunday noon. This is where we went to the lab. This is where we went to the laboratory and just started playing with stuff and trying stuff and making adjustments here, there, and everywhere. And we really got at it. We were running these processes like every single night. Okay, during the day, we're trying this, great. Dave's taking a copy home, running it on a spare laptop. It's running overnight. We're seeing how fast, how far, what's working, what's not. We learned a lot of optimizing tips, which you're gonna find out about in a bit. Got the entire process down to around 22 hours. So that's a pretty good chunk of time that we were able to save. So now all of a sudden we're feeling pretty good. We've got a time window that we feel we can pull this off in. So now we're going to go to the big migration day. We're going to save a backup from the production server. We're going to stop the server. Then we're going to copy that to the external hard drive. We're going to uninstall 16 on the server. So that hard drive is going to get moved over, attached to my laptop. Meanwhile, on the server, we're installing FileMaker Server 17. Now we're going to prep for the data migrator on the laptop. We're going to migrate their V3 live data into our V4 version of the file with the import, export scripts, etc. And we're already concurrently, we're finishing and testing the FileMaker server install on the server box. We're not even close to being done. The next step, let's run V3 to V4 data migrator. That we got it down to about 42 minutes, which is good. So that's good. We're gonna export, now that we have all of the live data is now sitting inside of our V4 file, we have access to those scripts that are gonna export the 68 data files. It took about 22 minutes, which is pretty quick. We're then going to import those 68 files into our scrubber file. That took about hour and 20 minutes-ish. And then we're going to go apply inside the scrubber file. We're going to go to those 19 tables and start applying that CSS formatting to that one field in 19 different tables. And that took about 23 minutes. So far we're going, okay, we're a couple of hours into this thing. That's not horrible. We got most of this done, right? Well, that's not the hard part. The hard part is importing back into the system. So we start the scrubber. We've run this before. We already know that the import process is going to take 18, 19 hours or something like that. So we begin the scrubber import into our copy of the V4 file. We start that up about 4 o'clock on Saturday. Here's where it gets fun. I got an external hard drive and a laptop. I move it to the front seat of my car. It's continuing to run. I got about an hour and a half of battery time. I'm driving home while this thing is working. So a little bit of fun right there. Now, the other thing I want you to understand, we were running this process on 2 or 3 boxes. So we had, I think, 3 different instances of this migration process going on exactly at the same time. So it happens that my laptop and hard disk combination was the fastest opportunity that we had. So we're going, okay, Dave's is the main parachute, but we do have a slower alternate parachute just in case this didn't happen. But we wanted to use mine because it was going to happen quicker and we'd know sooner rather than later whether everything was in good shape. So I'm running import scripts in my car as I drive home. I come home, I very gently move my laptop upstairs. Honey, get out of the way. I got to put this down and plug in the power supply. Finally, the imports finish the next day at 11 a.m. Again, 11 a.m. We're paying attention to our time window here, right? So I start the compacting. Great. Now we were compacting the file back to an external hard drive while I'm in the car driving back to the clients. We get back to the clients. Oh my God, we've got, we get there. I get there 30 or 40 minutes later. We've got a fresh install of FileMaker Server 17 on the server just waiting. We copy the files to the server, gave it a test again, deployed it. We're done. We finished. Oh my gosh, what a crazy weekend. And this was almost like Labor Day weekend of last year. It wasn't Labor Day, but it was right around that point in time. But anyway, it was done. It worked. We got all this done. 80 hours of processing got down into about 22, 24 hours total. What was the verdict? What was the takeaway from all of this? Huge success, massive success. The system, much smaller, runs faster. They've got cleaner data. They're logging way fewer errors on their server than before. The FileMaker server admin tool command line is responsive. The server loads dropped significantly. Our backups become more reliable. We had so many backups that were problematic, and we were now getting backups that were reliable again. By the way, one of the things I'll talk about in my later session today, I talk about progressives. We also instituted progressive backups, which they weren't using before, and that helped on the reliability factor as well. Their IT guys are practicing good, good shutdown and restart practices, so they're not adding additional corruption. They got over 5 months of reliable service out of this system, and their business continuity was restored. So they did not have these daily crashes anymore. They were going, I think, 3 or 4 weeks before they would kind of go, okay, we should probably restart again. So they were going weeks between restarts instead of daily. And they were able to plan those and do them in times when users weren't on the system and hurting, hurting their productivity and so forth. We kind of sat down and on back of the envelope estimated that the productivity and business savings for doing this was upwards between $100,000 and $300,000 in costs that were coming to them based on these shutdowns, slowdowns, restarts, and business losses and so forth. So it was a huge success. So anyway, it was really a trying project, really stretched our brains a little bit, reached out to a number of people. Claris, Wim was a big help on a few questions and areas here as well. And our team just learned an awful lot of things, but it was a really great success. So thank you for your patience. I will, like I said, I've got a bunch of findings. What did we learn? What are some things that you can walk away with from this session afterwards? And I think we can have that, maybe just do a quick little intermission so that I can get my brain, chilled out for a second. And if you guys have any questions initially about this, I'd be happy to answer them now. But I've also got some Q&A planned for the next session, which will probably only be about 15 minutes or so.